This is a little panoramic view of where I work. And look at this, it's October the 3rd. Leaves are starting to come off the trees. But what a great place to come start work. That's my street, and it's a dead end, so there's nobody around here. So you can see all my little projects and vehicles lined up. And yeah, let's get to work. It's a lovely day, it's a bit crisp, but let's get on with it. Today I'm going to teach you a little bit, or tell you some trips and tips that I've learnt with LT230 transmissions, and some shortcuts and some things you might not know. LT230 is quite a heavy gearbox, and it's really awkward because of the handbrake. So I use my little transmission jack here. I picked it for $100. It's a used one, it's an old one, but it was refurbished, and it's really good. What I did was I made some adapters, and you can see I've made 3 of them. This one isn't quite square because the holes didn't line up, but it doesn't really matter. This is for the LT230, and you can see there's 3 big holes at the bottom and 4 holes at the top. That means that you just take the centre bolts out and the bottom bolts drop through the holes, and then you can put it on at an angle, and that is perfect. It's absolutely wonderful. Now, I knocked that up myself out of a bit of scrap, so I wasn't going to pay $500 for it. I just used the bottom plate of the LT230 as a template, and I saw one of these on internet on a website, and I thought, oh, that's not too difficult. So all you've got to do is calculate the angle, which isn't too much. It's too difficult to do. I can't remember it off the top of my head, but it isn't that much. And drill the holes, weld it up. There you go. Next thing, this one here is my gearbox remover. So this one, with this little jig on top of there or on top of here, because this is a spacer I made, so it's all totally adjustable. So I can put those on top of here, that on top of there, that on top of there, that on top of, it doesn't really matter. But this is an adapter to get the gearbox and the transfer case out at the same time. I made a bit of a mess of a hole here, but that doesn't matter. And you can see where I've been chopping bits out to make it life just that little bit more easy. And you notice too, there's a big gouge missing out of it. And that's so that when you do an R380 on a 300 TDI with a different cross member in, that will slip underneath the cross member, support the gearbox whilst you take the cross member out. That's really important, because otherwise you're having to use a crane inside to support the gearbox while you take the cross member out, and then you get your lift into place. So that saved an awful lot of time and messing about. So that's a little thing about the adapters. The next thing I'm going to show you is about LT230s itself. The LT230, this one I've just taken out. This is a low ratio 1.4 out of a 300 TDI. The customer wanted a 1.2, the higher ratio, because this particular truck's got a HS 2.8 so it's got a lot more torque. The R380, the LT230, which was in the 300 TDI, was good. There was nothing wrong with it. It was just lacked a little bit of power. And a lot of people transfer these higher ratio transfer boxes on to get a little bit more speed and economy. But the problem is, the 300 TDI just lacks a little bit of poop, especially the older ones, to pull it along. So a britrest tip is, if your car will start in second gear and pull away in second gear, then you can get away with a higher ratio transfer case. If not, stick with what you've got. So I'm going to show you a few little bits and pieces now about these transfer cases, and a few bits and tips and tricks that I've learnt. One of them, this thing here, the diff lock warning light. Now is the time to replace it, and I'm going to show you how to set it up. It's a bugger of a job to get in and out, especially in the car. You can get into it, but you can see under here there's a little lock nut, and that is notoriously difficult to get into. So when it's off, if you're going to put a new switch in, or if anything, just put a new switch in, then get a spanner on there with a multimeter across these two contacts and turn the diff lock in and out, and that's a 10mm key, and just turn it in and out like that. Then you'll find out the switch is good, so don't have to worry about that. Next thing, oil leaks. Notorious for leaking oil. They leak out of here, they leak out of here. However, not so much out of here. Now somebody's put some seal around there just in case, but they don't really leak out of there. And a lot of people see oil on the casing here, they see dots and they see, oh, it's coming down from here, and they're all in tears when they bring it in the shop. And I said, well, no, it's not there. It's actually out of here, because the oil runs down here onto these bolts. And I've done countless of these now. In fact, I made a little tool set so I could actually take these off without taking the transfer case out of the vehicle. You can just move it back, and you need to undo this bolt here and count how many times it has to be taken back, because it's kind of critical. There's a little I'm going to see, can you see there? Oops, it's going to fall over. There's a little key locked in. It's keyway, and it's locked in with a tab washer. There it is. Mark it, mark the shaft, mark the housing, mark the nut, and turn it, and count how many times you turn it off. Very important. Then you can knock this through, and in the back of here there's an O-ring, and I can guarantee it will be all dry and flat. It's lost all its springiness. So every time we get people with, oh, we want the oil pan seal replacing, or this cover seal replacing, and it isn't that. I'm going to go and get you the tools, and I'll show you a little bit on what I use. So these are the tools. Not very spectacular, but all they are 10mm bolts, 10mm thread, and I cut a screwdriver slot in the end. I do that for two, but not for that one. And the reason for that is you don't want it to come off. So what I do is I take out the studs or the bolts, put that through there, and put that through here. Like that, look, screw that in. The reason why it's got its head off, so that if you can now then support this, and it won't tear the seal, the spline won't tear the seal. This is really important not to tear that seal. But it also guides it back on, because it's so heavy at this end and light at this end, it's a tendency to twist. By doing it like this, you can actually slide the gearbox back, the transfer box back, to replace the seal, and you've got enough room to get in. The reason why it's got its head on, well, if you haven't got the head on, you'll find out the gearbox can actually slip off the end of the studs and fall on as well. So that's just a little safety measure. The one good thing about being in Canada is we're blessed with a lot of Disco 1s that are rusted out. So we can use this higher ratio transfer case onto the Defenders. However, the Disco 1 comes with a transducer, because there's no speedo cable. This sits in here. Oh, let me get that. Let me put it together. Difficult with one hand. I've given up the head cam. Waste of time. So that sits in there. It all pushes in together. But one or two things to notice. The teeth are different. The number of teeth are different for the Disco 1 to the Defender. So you've got to get the correct tooth pattern for the tyre size. Very important. But the other thing that's really important is the square on the end for the transducer is smaller than the cable for the R380 for the 300 TDI, so you've got to swap this out anyway. So this is just a little piece that fits in here, but sometimes it's a bugger to get out. It's a bit rusted. I've broken trying to get out. If that happens, simply undo the bolts and knock it out from the inside outwards, and then you'll get it out. But you've got to change that. I've known a lot of people build the cars up and then think, oh, I can't get that piece out. So do all these things first. That's overlooked is the rear seal. Now I've robbed some bits and pieces of this to put on the other one because it was missing. So this is without the handbrake backplate. On here there is supposed to be a metal ring, like a cup that fits over the end of this here. And if you can see right down at the bottom, there's a little gap. Now the reason for that is that Land Rover didn't want oil leaking out of here. Surprise, surprise, Land Rover thought about oil leaks. Oil can leak out of here and onto the handbrake shoes, and thus rendering them useless. So what they did, they had the little ring on here, so that acted as a cup. Then oil could go along a little chute that's bolted onto here. It's just a little cup that fits sort of under here, and then the oil can come down and then through this hole here. They thought of everything. But it's not so often that these do leak. A lot of people do see them leaking, but I don't know. Not now. They seem to be quite good. On the old series trucks, they used to be notorious for leaking. Also here you can see where we bolt on the tool for taking the gearbox out, for taking the transfer case out. And the reason why the holes are bigger at the bottom is to clear the big washers for the bolts there. You could take them all out, I suppose. Doesn't really make much of a difference. While I'm on at this, while I've got it at this angle, when I fit transfer cases, I fit them without this cover or the gear, because it makes it so much more easier to get onto the shaft, you know, onto the studs of the back of the gearbox. And what you also should do is put a mark somewhere. The middle piece is quite easy to line up because it lines up off this boss, but these bolt holes here on the back, they're not even. They're offset for some bizarre reason. I don't know why. They'll only go on one way. So put a mark across here before you take it off, and then you can put it back on again. That's a really good tip.